Suddenly, our guide ordered us into the water. I jumped, panicked for a second, and when I opened my eyes, it was there, swimming towards me, ready to feed. Galeophobia, or the fear of sharks, is one of the most widespread phobias in the whole world. Recent studies actually show that half of the people alive today are afraid of those animals. And this has resulted in 4 out of 10 Americans to be afraid of the ocean. And 64% of the people who live in the UK wish that sharks did not even exist. And why I'm telling you all of this is that I'm one of them. No, I don't mean that I would like to get rid of sharks. They're extremely important to each and every one of us. And I will tell you more about this later. But I'm afraid of them. So much so that I've developed a fear of swimming in open waters. And so in this video, it's gonna sound stupid, but I will attempt to face this fear and swim next to the world's largest shark. Can I get out of the water now? My story, just like for most people with phobias, starts in my early childhood. I grew up in Estonia, a small country in Northeast Europe, and as a kid, I spent most of my summers playing with my friends near a small lake. There was a sort of freedom to swimming, almost like flying through the water. Yet little did I know, all of this was about to change. I guess I must have been 8 or 9 at that time, and one day, when my parents weren't home, I decided to watch a movie by myself. And now, looking back, this movie changed the course of my life forever. As many of you can probably guess, this movie was a classic from Steven Spielberg called The Jaws. Although I understood that there was no sharks in the 1,000-kilometer radius from my home, then still, this movie planted something in me, and over time, things started to change. First, I stopped going to the lake at summers. Soon after, I began to prefer sunbathing to staying in the water whilst on a family vacation. By the time I was a teenager, I only enjoyed swimming in closed pools, as open water just gave me anxiety. Luckily, about 10 years ago, I decided to make a big change in my life and started traveling. This new lifestyle brought me to many different seas and oceans all over the world. And for the first time in my life, I realized that although beautiful, I was afraid of open water. Before traveling, the fear had been unconscious. Yet just like they say, first step to solving a problem is acknowledging it. For me, it meant 8 years of doing absolutely nothing about it. The only thing that really changed was the fact that now I went into the water even less because, well, I knew where the anxiety was coming from. And living like this continued until last spring in 2022. I'm not sure if I want to go anymore. Like, we got our towels here and everything else, but how deep is it over there? I don't think I have mentioned it on this channel before, but in 2022, while traveling in South and Central America, Liisu and I decided to go to a diving school in Dominican Republic and become licensed divers. For Liisu, it was a fun thing to do, as she has always loved water. Yet for me, it was one of the scariest things I could think of, facing my fear head on. The course was challenging and full of new knowledge, but the thing that surprised me was that I actually felt comfortable while doing it. There was no fear or panic when I was underwater, just the pure pleasure of experiencing the beautiful underwater world. Sadly, after the dives ended, the fear came back. But what I gained from this course in the Caribbean was the knowledge that I am capable of swimming in the ocean. And while doing it, the fear and terror seemed to disappear. Which now brings us to the current day and our adventure here in the Maldives. If you've heard about the Maldives before, then you probably know that the seas surrounding this country and those islands are incredibly rich and full of life. Literally like half of the activities you can see and do here are in there, in the ocean. And yes, I know it's a huge step going from getting my diving license to swimming with the biggest shark in the world. Yet I knew that if I wanted to tame my fear, I just had to give it a try. First off, to ease into the situation, we started by few snorkeling trips near the islands we were staying. It is mind-blowing how beautiful such swims in the Maldives are. Only about 0.1% of the world's oceans are such shallow reefs, yet around 25% of all marine species can be found here. These reefs are truly like the rainforests of the ocean. But more than just the beauty, we also had our first encounter with sharks. Baby shark, do 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 pa pa pa. We saw our first shark. Nice. We've opened the score, and it was exciting. Yeah, they were super small and they didn't really scare me. They were hunting for the little schools of fish. But altogether, like the importance of sharks, it's hard to put in words, because they're pretty much the wolves of the ocean. They hunt old animals, diseased animals, and they keep the ecosystem in balance and also disease free. Yet seeing some baby sharks was definitely not enough to convince me to jump into a water together with the world's biggest shark. And so every moment I got, I tried to be close to these animals, to kinda get used to their presence. While on an island called Omadhu, we spent hours watching nurse sharks hunt around illuminated pier every evening. I would not want to be in this water at the moment. Oh, a rain! And as the next stepping stone, we also got into the water with them. These sharks are mostly harmless to people and only attack when provoked. But well, you try to tell this to a phobia that convinced me not to swim in lakes with no sharks in 1,000-kilometer radius of them. Okay, that was amazing and bizarre at the same time. You're in there and you're swimming with them. You're facing your fears and at the same time it's so beautiful. What the heck? So without a doubt, it was a huge step forward, and for the first time, it actually seemed that the plan to swim side by side with a 8-meter monster might be doable. As the last bit of preparation, we decided to go back to the beginning and do the thing that for the first time made me realize that oceans might not be as scary as I portrayed them in my mind. The drive to the diving spot took about 20 minutes, and getting familiar with the scuba gear once more was quite the challenge. It had been 1.5 years after all. But once in the water, I felt the same as in the Caribbean. There was no fear, just the pure joy of seeing the beauty of our ocean right there in front of me. Being able to scuba dive has really opened my eyes to a totally new way of enjoying nature, and even the sight of some quite large reef sharks did not scare me. It's amazing that fear only exists in the past and future, but while acting and doing things, there is no room for this in our minds. Well, I had done everything in my power and was as ready for the challenge as I was ever going to be. So, we booked a tour to go and see the infamous whale shark.
Morning!
There was only one problem. Since humans can't feed whale sharks, there is never a guarantee to seeing one. The ride in a speedboat lasted about 1.5 hours.
And if you're wondering how the sharks and marine life is found, he's the main man.
For many times, our guide Istvan kept on flying the drone to scan the ocean from above. And then, suddenly, it happened. He ordered us all to the water, and there was no room for hesitation. I jumped, panicked for a second, and when I opened my eyes, it was there. Swimming towards me, with just meters away, it was a huge whale shark, currently in the middle of a feeding frenzy. These beasts can grow up to 12 meters in length, and the one next to us, without a doubt, was a big adult. It made us, the snorkelers beside it, look like dwarfs. Luckily for humans, these huge sharks feed on some of the smallest prey possible. They eat plankton, which are extremely small animals and plants that float in the water. And the sharks catch them by swimming against the current with their mouth wide open. It's hard to put in words how special it felt to be in a water next to the world's biggest fish.
Just absolutely incredible. You jump in from the boat to snorkel and there's a whale shark. Like it's hard to put in words. Just crazy.
It had taken me years to find the courage to do something like this, and the reward is a moment that I will surely never forget. Friends, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I truly hope that my journey of conquering my fear, or well, living with my fear, because I'm still kind of afraid of what's out there, helped you understand that the scariest and biggest predators of our ocean are not as dangerous as we let our minds think. And really a small part of me wishes that maybe with the help of videos like this, the next generation, the generation without the movie Jaws, will have the opportunity to grow up without this irrational fear. And as a last thing, I got some good news for you if you would also like to visit this country here, the Maldives. Together with Liisu, we have just finished putting together a step-by-step travel guide to Maldives that's pretty much for everyone who does not want to spend their whole year's savings in a resort. It covers everything from sample itineraries to accommodation, transportation, and is designed to make your journey a bit cheaper and a lot easier. And to make it affordable for everybody, we have decided to share it with you for only $15 a copy, and I can pretty much promise you that if you read it before coming here, it will save you hundreds. So if you want to know more about it, make sure to check the description for more info, and we will see you next Thursday in a little bit less than a week. Take care, my friends. Bye.